Hashberry District is the particularly dangerous borough of Dark Beach, comprised of an endless dark maze of warehouses, alleys, and boat shacks positioned between the beach and the riverfront docks. This is where vast quantities of all manner of legal items are loaded and unloaded during the day, and the same in way of illegal imports at night. However, it is tremendously overlooked by the watch and lawless at all times, especially the particular building which was my current destination. First, I spotted the Eager Palm, a barely noticeable drinking spot off of the street, which acts as the first marker in the long, complex hunt through Hashberry, which leads to the pit. I stopped and gazed up through the rain at the creaking primitive sign over the door and tried to remember which alley was the next turn. As if nature were answering, lightning flashed to my left, and I saw the red painted letter P on the inside wall leading me onward. As I progressed past the huddled forms of sleeping homeless and trash barrels which lay scattered throughout the length, I turned right on the next turn into a ruined, muddy street which I remembered to only follow to the very next alley beside a closed Wagoneer's, where I took a left. This particular zigzag eventually ended with a long set of narrow stone stairs running down the extent of a crumbling moss-covered wall into an even darker mass of shadow below. I could hear the rumble of life as I came closer and closer to the door, which I knew lay waiting, bathed in the light of a gas lamp below. I looked up at the massive iron-bound slag of oak before me and took a deep breath to resolve myself as I knocked with the head of my cane and waited for the small hand-sized hole above to slide open. In one quick motion, it opened and a wide black eye gazed down. "Piss off," came the familiar voice. "You're not welcome here, One Trick." I winced and tried to maintain a calm exterior. "Why?" I tried to sound convincingly surprised. "My gold spends as well as anyone else's." "You know why. You and your bloody tricks. You're a cheat, One Trick. Now be off." Just as he was about to slide the small door closed, I quickly pulled the leather bag from within my shirt and jingled it in the light, which created the desired effect. Slowly, it slid back open. "I heard there's a big deal down here. A lot of money being thrown around." I winked suggestively, and taking the strap from around my neck, swung it back and forth like a mesmerist's watch. "What if there is? What you gonna do, Tricky? Promise to lose some gold." He laughed at his own joke behind the door. "All I'm doing is offering to give you this bag right now to let me in." I could almost feel his excitement through the door. "You might have a deal there, Tricky." I could hear the locks and chains being undone and watched as the door creaked open and a large, stubby, three-fingered hand reached out. "Give it here, and I'll let you in." "Great high spirits, Bambo. You must think I'm a fool." I pulled back a step and watched as the door opened a bit more. A squat, barrel-like form emerged from the shadows as the familiar face of the doorman became visible in all its scarred, scraggly, goggle-eyed glory. He had all the qualities they used to associate with what was called a low Northman in the olden times. Although most people of the Commonwealth now have intermixed, occasionally you might meet one who seems a throwback to the days of deliberate segregation between the rulers and the peasantry of the Hulda folk. As the highborn had become gradually frailer and incapable of any real physical exertion, selling their kin into the servitude of demons, the working class, low-born Huldor had become not only physically resilient, but mechanically and scientifically gifted, qualities which aided them greatly in the eventual overthrow of their occult-obsessed cousins. A war had been fought between magic and machines, and in time the massive steam-powered war machines of the Low Huldur had prevailed, and thus the great northern Commonwealth nations had been born. All teachings and remnants of demonology and magic had been repressed and banned to the point that now, centuries later, they ceased to believe much of it was even real. However, some such individuals, such as Bambo, the pit doorkeeper, still carried the proud appearance of their forebears and resembled short, powerful mounds of solid, beaten muscle. I cannot read his expression properly beneath his eyewear, but I suspected he was locked on to the gold. "I will give you 5 coins, Bambo, and then, if you step aside and let me in, I will give you the rest. Not to mention, if I have a good night, I might tip on the way out." I watched him carefully, as I would not put a violent robbery past him either. "Sounds like a deal, Trick." He smiled and revealed the mouthful of oddly matched metallic and ivory teeth set into the spring-loaded jaw device that was his dentures. His other hand still rested on the pistol hanging at his belt, an impressive, large-barreled wheel-lock device with a monstrous, jagged axe blade attached to the end. He wriggled his remaining fingers over his palm, and so carefully, removing 5 shining coins from the bag, and deftly dropped them into his waiting grasp. Stepping back, well out of his grasp range, I watched as he examined each, stepping aside and gesturing for me to enter. "No funny stuff, One Trick, or I'll have you ground into sausage." I crossed past him and entered the tunnel-like hallway before a sharp whistle caught my ear. I whirled to see the doorman now blocking the portal, which was the only entrance to or exit from the establishment, once again with his damaged palm out. I tossed him the bag and quickly began to try and put distance between myself and the greed-stricken Bambo. I had 1 hour now, maybe a bit more, if he did not pay attention to his coins. I could see the warm orange light, hear the yelling and singing of voices, and smell the food, smoke, and alcohol of the pit ahead. Despite the direty and seriousness of my mission, I admit my blood was stirring as I heard the calls of the various tables and dice games. Breaking through the beaded door at the end of the hall, I entered the enormous cathedral-like chamber and gazed at the sea of people, gathered and mingling in an enormous, excited crowd. Everywhere there were games being played, as here was the center place of all the city's gambling. The vast crowd of rich, poor, and everything between, all encircling the massive walled pit, which lay at the center of the chaos. Every few hours, there would be a fight in the pit, each of increasing violence and value throughout the night. In between these fights, the patrons would entertain themselves, gambling in any imaginable way, while they collected bets and discussed the next coming fight. The fights would be brutal, and many to the death. I gazed at the boss booth, which was a balcony at the forefront of the pit, which housed the most important members of the night's spectators, who sat at a shadowy candlelit tables which had both the most comfort and the best view of the activities. The booth was for both the city's criminal overlords and also those who were the upper crust of the city's council, who wished to remain discreetly anonymous. Over the years, I had become more acquainted with the nature of the underworld and its politics than I realized it existed hand in hand with its bureaucratic twin. I studied the booth and tried to make out any faces, but all was safe in the shadows. I looked for familiar faces, not with which to associate, but of whom to avoid. Yet I needed information, and therefore I required someone to talk. Everywhere were games, and oh, great high spirits, did I long just for a moment to divide my attention and be seduced by the excitement around me. Was I even right? Was this where I needed to be? Just then, someone startled me from my turmoil as they bumped into me casually and apologized quickly as the figure tried to slip away. However, I had felt it, the hand which had tried to violate me pockets, and in an instant I had snapped his wrist into my hand and pulled the figure forward, holding my cane at the ready. I'm sorry, sir. I'm quite clumsy, came a young man's voice from beneath the cowl of a poor brown cloak. You're not, I replied, and gazed down at his free hand, which was attempting to place something away in his pocket. I saw the shine from between his fingers and laughed to myself. It was my crystal. I had not returned it to the box after I had retrieved it from Till's after the incident. This cloaked thief had deftly snatched it from my pocket, and I would have barely noticed but for the fact I had expected as much from the moment I entered. The owners employed such urchins to scour the crowds, attempting to acquire as much from the revelers as possible. What the youth had not realized now was that the crystal, much to my surprise and interest, was glowing in his hand. What do you mean, sir? He stammered as he tugged slightly from me to release him. Hold your hand up, I said, and watched as he held out the hand and revealed it was empty. You're very good, I laughed, but it's glowing in your pocket. He tried to feign confusion, but he then realized what I was saying as he desperately tried to find the excuse that would save him. I looked beneath the cowl and saw a lean, pale, young face with eyes like shining black opals. I immediately thought of Ravenissa as an alarm had sounded in my mind. Give it here, I commanded, and watched as he carefully removed it and held it up. I could see his thoughts, and in a moment he would fight and flee. But for this instant, he was interested in the glowing crystal in his hand. Why is it glowing? He asked. Do you like it? I answered, carefully taking it and holding it up before him. He was just for this instant mesmerized as it glowed faded in my grasp, and I could see him through the glass-like stone, and what I saw, just for that moment, was horrifying. All around him was darkness, shadow, and corruption. His features did not even appear human. What they did resemble, I was very familiar with. It was him. Even as the vision faded from my scrying stone, I knew. And even as I realized it, I could see he was preparing to run. It's okay, mate, I said calmly as I let go of his arm. If I continued to hold him, he would feel trapped and resist. We've all been caught before, I smiled, and concentrated my every thought on focusing my energy to the fate and fortune charm I repeated in my head. I needed his interest. Is that art? He asked softly, still gazing at the stone. He was seeing something as well, which gave him a look of cautious confusion. But I could not guess what. It is, I answered. Just a seeing stone, a simple charm. Do you see something in it? He stared quietly for a moment, as if he was overcome by some thought. I did, I think. He was struggling with something, which was distracting him from what normally would be considered danger. My name is Eldon, I spoke calmly and evenly, hoping to continue to hold his interest over his immediate urge to flee. What do they call you? I asked this, realizing I had never heard him given a name. I'm called Spider, but what? I don't have a proper name. He now looked away from the crystal, and I could see suspicion clouding his expression as he studied me like some wary animal. Are you an orphan by any chance? I asked, trying desperately to think of some way to engage him longer. He looked confused for a moment, as if trying to decide if he were angry or frightened. Me too, I added quickly. It's strange to not know what your name is, isn't it? I remember when I was adopted. I was already 4 years old, and my new parents didn't like the name they gave me at the orphanage, so they just changed it. I was so confused. I had to learn it wasn't Cecilia anymore. I watched him carefully and saw the smile crossed over the shadow of his expression. He was not seeing me as a threat. That's not true, he said, chuckling. That's a girl's name. Well, perhaps I was a girl, I answered, winking. Maybe my new parents didn't like that either, so they changed it. You're having me on, mate, he balked. You're not serious. Perhaps, I chuckled slightly, and was almost slightly startled when a bell began ringing from the front of the pit. Another fight, the young man said almost sadly. Really? Have you been watching? Desperate to keep his interest and trying to conceive of some way. A bit. But I'm over it, he answered and stepped up beside me. I'm not one for this fight. What? Just this one, or fighting in general? There's only been one today, he sighed. That can't be right, not at this time of night. There should have already been 3 or 4. They have, but it's only been one. He spoke solemnly and gestured to the gate below the pit, which was now slowly opening in the wall. All around were calls and shouts of ecstatic glee, as a figure emerged from within and was thrown violently into the open space. All of the concern and focus I had turned into trying to keep the boy from fleeing suddenly ceased beneath a sudden gnawing attack of horror as my eyes adjusted on the form laying half dead on the floor of the pit. They've had him fight different blokes all night. I think he was supposed to lose and die in the first one. But when he won, the bets started rolling, and now it's a huge, massive pot on when he's going down, finally. My hands began to tremble, and I gripped my cane as I saw the bloody figure try to stand against the wall. Even covered in his own blood, I could see that his skin was green beneath the scarlet. It was Fisher. He was barefooted, with his white shirt torn open, revealing a muscular but bruised and cut physique beneath as he stumbled along the wall, dazed and probably dying. Why? I whispered, before I realized I had spoken my thoughts. They say he's been killing bosses all over the city, the boy called Spider answered. I don't know. He doesn't seem like a killer. I looked at him suddenly with a realization. Have you spoken to him? I studied him closely and could see his turmoil. He feared everything. He had learned that he was surrounded by danger and madness. No, of course not, he replied defensively. It's okay. I met his darting, fearful eyes. I won't say anything, it's just that I trailed off as I struggled to find the words. "You know him, don't you?" he finished, and I was stricken by the level of his perception. Yes, I do. And I find it hard to imagine he is a killer. As I spoke, the opposite gate was opening below, and a massive shadow strode out. A strange, twisted figure, lean with muscle and covered in strange sigils and symbols tattooed over his corpse-like pale skin. His shaven head had ears clipped into points, and his visage had a feral, inhuman look with strange yellow eyes and a large, snarling mouth filled with sharp teeth. "Maybe you don't know him as well as you think," Spider said, without presumption, but with certain knowledge. "What do you mean?" I asked, as the tall, hairless creature strode before the audience, raising its arms menacingly to excite the crowd. "I'm just saying, he's been killing blokes all night, mate." The youth spoke with a strange confidence, or perhaps pride. If I were to wager, I would guess he was rooting for Fisher. "This is a joke." A sad panic was building within me as I began to wonder if I was going to have to stand and watch Fisher be beaten to death. "He's half dead. There is no sport here. It's ridiculous." I struggled to maintain my composure. It would not do for me to begin crying here in this most wretched place in the city. All thrill was lost, every temptation dead. There was no seduction to this place now. I saw it finally for what it was, just as the priestess had described it, a pit of man's corruption. And so, I would be here to see this man I knew murdered to entertain the sewage of our town. Just watch me," he said gently, and I could not read his tone. "I don't know if I can," I responded. He simply nodded and gestured at the scene below. I watched as Fisher leaned broken against the wall as the tall, pale being paraded before the crowd. It approached him, and laughing, kicked his legs out from under him, and pointed mockingly as he collapsed to the dirt. As Fisher struggled onto his hands and knees, his corpse-hued enemy kicked him savagely in his stomach, and I flinched at the sight of blood spilling from beneath his mustache and into the dust. I truly barely knew the man I was watching die. I had only met him on a few occasions. I could remember seeing him playing billiards and smoking cigars with Brandy at the club with Pat and Tills. I could only recall a feeling of admiration and respect for this man. He seemed a genuinely warm and compassionate person who always seemed to express interest in those around him. After seeing the amazing people of the Stoneland Society, I had thought he must be something truly amazing to be considered a leader of that group of people. But a killer? The monster who had prowled the city committing nightmarish crimes? Was it possible? I could not reconcile these facts, and could only watch as the tall, bestial man grabbed Fisher's hair with his clawed hands and began to lift him up to the boots and screams of the excited crowd. Just as I was about to look away, something bizarre happened. It was subtle, but I noticed it just as Spider nudged my arm to make sure I was paying attention. Just as the vile combatant prepared to hold Fisher's head in his hands and plant his knee directly into his face, a change came over the broken victim that I would find hard to describe. It was as if suddenly his entire state altered, and he reared back with a sudden flash of motion in which he planted his feet and smoothly snatched the creature's wrist with both hands and behind his head. Now, standing bent over with its arm in his grasp, he both whirled around and scooped his enemy's legs out from under him, with his own in a movement so fast and fluid it was almost invisible. Now, with the man-creature on its back, with its arm still in his grasp, he wrenched it, causing it to rear up on its side, as if he intended on flipping it onto its chest. However, this creature now snarled and pulled Fisher down into its arms, savagely wrapping its arm over his throat in a headlock. For one moment, I could see Fisher's face and was stunned as I noted that his entire demeanor seemed alien to what I normally associated with him. There was something calm but animalistic and deadly in his face and his eyes. His eyes were different, I was sure. I could swear that Fisher's eyes were always very noticeably green, almost emerald in color. But here and now, they shone bright and violet, like two sparkling bits of amethyst. He twisted in a single cat-like motion, and a moment later had entangled himself into the enemy's grasp like some coiled python. The creature, in absolute terror, released and pulled back suddenly as it realized what had happened. It crawled backwards and stood in shock as it tried to comprehend how it had become enwrapped. However, as it stumbled, Fisher had leapt up, crossed his legs over its shoulder, and in a single, violent twist, snapped its head sideways, instantly killing it. They both dropped to the ground, and Fisher now collapsed again, as he had been in the beginning, only now laying by the corpse of his fallen foe. The crowd was utterly silent. Then a wave of angry yells and bitter curses began to flood the pit as objects like food, bottles, and trash were thrown in a rage at Fisher's prostrate form. "I really didn't know that time," Spider whispered with a hint of relief mixed with triumph. "I don't think he can go again, though," he sighed. "You know him?" he asked, and I felt as if this was one of those moments where I was tested. Would I admit I knew this hated being amongst an army of those who wished him dead? "What if I do?" I replied. "Would you like to speak with him?" He pulled back his cowl and revealed for the first time his full features framed in long black hair, which again reminded me of Ravenissa. He studied me intensely, his eyes hard and searching. "I would," I answered once more, feeling only truth could achieve anything with this boy. "Would you try to save him?" Once more, strange, cold scrutiny in those black, shining eyes. This boy, who had been first a monster. I tried to understand that this was the curseling. This was the boy the priestess had protected. "Would you help if I did?" I answered, already knowing the answer. "This is not an honorable death," he answered. "A very strange thing for a thief to say. Why do you care about honor?" He winced, as if he had been jabbed by something sharp. I don't know. It's just something I hear sometimes. I don't remember things clearly, but there are these things I hear in my mind over and over, and then there's..." "What?" I asked. "I have this memory. I see this person sometimes in my dreams. It's a woman in white robes. I feel like she is my mother, but I also feel like she is..." "Go on." "Like she is a god. Can't she be both?" He looked back confused, as if he thought I might be mocking him. But a sudden realization flashed on his smooth, sharp features. "It's just that I saw her for a moment." "When?" I saw her for a moment inside that crystal when you held it up. I need to know who she is. Can you help me? I believe we can help each other. You know where they are holding Fisher? I've been talking to them since they brought him in. He is locked in a cage in the back rooms. The boy I had known as the Curseling began to lead me through the crowd, and suddenly I realized he had referred to Fisher as them. Wait, you said them? We stood at the head of another tunnel, covered only in a beaded curtain, as he pulled his hood back up protectively over his head. Yes, I've spoken to both of them, but he's almost dead now, and I think she's the only thing keeping him alive. Who are you talking about? I studied him closely and saw only a flash of confusion, followed by irritation. So you really don't know, then? I thought you said you knew him. His words carried a slight accusatory tone as he slid through the beads into a dark stone tunnel. The smell of sewer indicated our proximity to the city underworld of tunnels. I have met the man called Antoine Fisher many times. Who else is there? I believe her name is Shala or something, but she's always been called the Flayer, from what I understand. Slowly, I was assimilating the information until I realized what the ghost had been saying. The boy had been with the Fisher and the Flayer. There's someone else inside of Fisher, I stated with sudden understanding. Aye, she's been trying to get me to help them escape, but I can't do what she wants. What is that? She wants me to steal the dagger back from the boss and give it to her. But I can't get into it. It's locked in a box in his treasury. They all hate it, but they're all convinced it's worth a lot of money or something. So Fisher had a dagger. I was trying to put it all together, but still I struggled. Well, yeah, but she considers it hers. She said that if I can just get it to her, that they can escape themselves. It's magic or something. And there it was. Fisher was possessed by an entity that had used a probably magic dagger to commit the murders. But Spider, I said, grabbing his cloak to stop him as he led us deeper into the maze of tunnels. Why were they, or she, or whatever, killing those people? She says they all deserved it. Even Fisher said that there was a great evil at work, and that they had been trying to end it. She calls it a war. She's always fought. It has something to do with elves, but I don't know anything about them. Come on, we need to hurry. Spider, how did you end up here? Now, we had come to another set of lamp-lit stairs, and I began to wonder how far into this labyrinth we would go. He stopped and looked down, concentrating. It's strange. I can't remember things. I know I had to have come from somewhere, but everything seems like a dream, just images and visions. I keep seeing this woman, and I can tell she's speaking, but I just remember awakening in the cold, naked, in the sewers. It was terrifying. I was very sick for a time. I was starving and lost, but I kept hearing words telling me I would be okay. I kept seeing an eagle in my mind, leading me through the darkness. After a bit, I found the city above, but it was winter and so bloody cold. I started stealing things. I stole clothes and then food, and then I broke into an empty building. I'm very good at stealing, thankfully, or else I would have died. I lived like that for a bit. But I think the business got wind of me and they started watching me. I was in their territory. They don't take to poachers. If you're not in a company, then you're not protected. we had come to the expansive sewers over which there was a stone footbridge over which he led me. So, I got caught a few months back and they brought me here to throw me in the pit. They threw me in against a bog wolf. And when they saw me escape, they realized I was talented. Wait a minute. How did you get out of the pit? He turned, smiling proudly. That's how I got my name. As I watched, he reached up and began crawling along the wall on all fours in a way which eerily reminded me of his previous form, indicating that he had not lost all the traits of his other. He returned to a normal gait, laughing. I crawled out in the middle of the fight, and when they saw, they were impressed. They offered me a job here with the company. I've been working for them ever since. Have you wondered why you can do that? I have, but wondering has brought me no answers. I have some answers for you, Spider, but first, where are we going? I've brought us around the back of the chamber where they're keeping him. We can sneak in through a hole in the back wall. He was so accustomed to these tunnels, it was almost unsettling. He led me to a small drain tunnel with bent bars, on it which he immediately began to squeeze through with ease. I followed awkwardly and watched as he crawled along the tunnel in the disturbing insect-like way that he had while I half crouched, half waded along the narrow passage, bashing my head occasionally against the surface. Ahead I could see light and a shadow as he crept into it carefully. He pressed his fingers to his lips and gestured for me to be silent as I climbed beside him. He pointed into a vast, dark chamber of stone, where there was a number of empty cages like one would see in a street zoo. There were dark, strange men in a group, dragging Fisher to the open door of one of the cages before they threw him inside. The individuals caught my eye, as they shared certain savage qualities with the individual Fisher had been fighting and killed. They were corpse pale, with large, strange eyes, oddly shaped faces. They had the quality of savagery in their mannerisms and dressed like mercenaries. They were spitting at Fisher and kicking at the cage angrily as one of the individuals instructed them to stop and ushered them out, shouting and cursing. "He's worth a lot of money," Spider whispered. "Why?" I looked into his strange dark eyes, confused. "Two reasons from what I've heard. One is the growing wage of bets on the fights, but the other is blood." "I don't understand." "You say blood?" "Yes. It's part of almost every conversation about them. Come, we will not have much time." I watched as he removed a brick from above and removed the bars of the drain entrance into the chamber. We entered and rushed to the cage where he lay a broken heap of flesh. "Does he live?" I asked. "Barely," came a strange female voice, which I swore could have come from inside the cage. "He is slipping away, but I still hold him," it said, and I froze, staring at the boy, as if he were making the voice, but he stood silent. "Will you help us?" Spider looked at the form with a sort of despair. "She wants us to get something from the treasure room," Spider explained. "Who?" I asked, moving closer and peering in between the bars. I told you," he replied, slightly irritated. "The Flayer. She wants us to help them." "The Flayer?" I found Fisher's bruised and scratched face in the darkness, and almost jumped as his lips moved, and the female voice was projected out. "He knows you," she said, I think in reference to me. "I know Mr. Fisher. We have met many times," I answered wide-eyed as I tried to understand what I was seeing. Yes. You're the little hedge wizard, aren't you? The thief. He likes you. Will you help us? I was speechless. We're running out of time, Eldon, came what seemed a mixture of the female and Fisher's actual voice. I am the only thing holding him in this body. If you will do what I ask, we can save him. Who are you? I asked with a certain fear at her answer. I am Shala, she answered. But they used to call me Flayer. I knew what this meant. It had been her, or Fisher, or the two of them that had committed the murders. You are the Flayer, the killer. I almost leapt as his eyes snapped open, but they were not Fisher's normal cool green-colored eyes. They were larger, brighter, and almost glowing with an ethereal violet light. I am fighting a war, boy, she answered with restrained rage. I kill those who should be killed. There was not a soul among them who deserved anything more than what I gave them. They are foul monsters, and they will take his life and his blood if they can. He is mine. Those eyes burned into me as I reached into my pocket and my fingers found the crystal. They cannot have him. You must save him. How? I whispered as I slowly lifted the crystal up to my eye level and squinted into its facets. My dagger. Bring me my dagger, and I will do the rest. As I looked at what should have been Fisher's face, I saw something completely different. I had never seen a full-blooded elf before. I had read the descriptions and seen paintings and drawings, but never had I imagined. The face which peered out with its huge lavender orbs was small and angular, with a tiny mouth and nose. This face was framed in a vast tangle of braided black hair, through which the points of two sharp ears could still be seen. You are elf-blooded, she said, as if she knew I was seeing her through the lens. We knew it the first time we saw you. My hands were beginning to shake. There was something powerful and frightening in her eyes and words. Help us, boy. Her words were a cross of command and pleading. What do you want us to do? She wants her dagger. I can get to it, but it's in a locked box within a locked room, and I cannot open it. I have no talent for locks. He does. Fisher says he knows a trick. Will you help? Spider said, as if I were deciding for both of us. And I knew indeed I was. Thoughts raced through my head. This being was a killer. I could feel her power even now. What might she do with her weapon? But what would happen if I let Fisher die? I could not even now believe that Fisher was in fact evil, even knowing about the murders. I had only come to find the boy and return him to the spirit so that my friend might be freed. Save him, she said, and I looked back through the crystal, and I saw that this being, this Shala, this Flayer, was weeping. Whatever she was, she truly cared for Fisher. And when asking myself the same, I decided I did as well. Take me to the box and I'll open it. Spider nodded and already moved to the door. Don't you touch it, Eldon, came a cough from the cage that was unmistakably Fisher. Let the boy handle it, not you. I did not answer, but only nodded my understanding. I truly wondered what I was getting into. We will have to get down this hallway to the treasury. I gripped my cane and returned my crystal to my pocket. He opened the door slightly and peered out through the crack. We can go, it's clear. We crept into the hall, which was lit only by a few torches burning on the walls. We made our way down the tunnel until we came to a corner, which Spider motioned for us to stop. Looking carefully around the edge of the wall was a door, which Spider indicated as the one we needed. However, a monstrous being sat placidly in a chair beside. Such a being I had not seen before, as his appearance stood somewhere between the strangers I had seen earlier and something even worse. His gnarled, scarred features moved around twisted, fanged maw as he sat eating from a bowl of soup. Will we need to kill him? Spider said nervously, but not nearly as nervously as I would have expected. Well, I certainly hope not, I answered. Good, 'cause I know him, he added, and I wondered if murder might have been applicable if Spider had not met the fellow. Could you approach him and keep him busy for a moment? I asked, as I began to rehearse the sleep charm in my head. I can, but you're not going to kill him. No, Spider, I'm going to put him to sleep, but it takes a minute. Oh, good, he smiled gratefully, and standing, walked around the corner. I watched as the horrid being looked up from his meal, and I saw to my discontent that he had enormous yellow eyes which locked onto Spider. How goes it, Marcus? Spider said cheerfully. Spider, it growled. What are you doing down here? Its voice an edged snarl, but with a vaguely calm sentiment beneath. I got bored, and I heard you were down here. Thought I'd get you to tell me the rest of that story about your homeland. You're not supposed to be down here, lad, it answered, running its long, bony fingers over its shaven head, which was covered in tattoos but for a single stripe of hair down the middle. It'll be okay. You don't mind. Spider's friendly tone was even, without any sign of deceit. I hastily began weaving the patterns before me as I focused on the god mentally. You want to hear about the Twilight Valley? He replied, yawning. Oh, you've never seen anything like it, I'll wager. He leaned back and blinked his huge eyes heavily. Are you all right, Marcus? Spider said, grabbing the thing's shoulder and shaking it gently. Oh, I'm just so bloody. His words trailed off as the bowl slipped and fell to the stone floor empty. He slumped forward and Spider caught him, positioning him carefully against the wall. What are these men? I asked as I came around the corner. They're foreigners, Spider answered matter-of-factly. I fought the urge to reply sarcastically. They are quite strange, aren't they? Yes, truly, I answered as I crouched and began to study the door lock. I don't rightly even know what strange is, really, Spider explained as he stared at the sleeping creature. I've only met many people outside of here, so I thought maybe there was others like them. No, not really. They are quite unusual, I said, as I removed the key from around my neck and began the chanting. So you use a key then? He asked, fascinated. Is it art? Are you using art? I am. And as he stared intrigued at the old iron skeleton key, it began to go blue. Finishing the chant, I placed it into the keyhole and it slid as if it were made for that particular lock. I turned it and it clicked open. Spider was delighted. We entered the dark chamber and immediately I was struck by the enormous number of chests stacked in every corner. Great high spirits, I whispered, imagining the sheer amount of gold within. Once more the familiar song of temptation began to sing in my mind as I thought of my empty pockets. It's this one, Spider said, pointing to a table where a single oaken box sat. I was with them when they put it in there, when they first caught them. They were terrified. They think the dagger is cursed. My guess, I said as I ran my hand over the box, carefully feeling the general energy from within, is that it probably is. I spoke the chant again until my key once more glowed, and I held it to the lock. Once more it slid in, and a click was heard. I carefully opened the lid and gazed down at the item within. There I beheld a knife, a long, thin, curved dagger, which I immediately recognized as a fish blade, a knife used to cut and prepare fish after they are caught, except that the blade was so large and shiny, and the handle was some strange carved bone like ivory. It was truly beautiful and yet simple. A very well made but somewhat ordinary item with runes carved all over the grip. I immediately found myself reaching for it, as I had the sudden urge to feel the blade resting in my hand. And I would have, had Spider not caught my wrist. No, Mr. Eldon, he said, worried. They said no. I think it might be dangerous. I almost snapped at him until I looked at his sad expression. A boy whose life had been full of so many curses and misery. Of course, I said, smiling and pulling back. Here, I said, and handed him a handkerchief from my coat, which he used to wrap the weapon and place it carefully on his belt. We crept carefully out the door and past the still sleeping Marcus. We were almost back to the door when I heard the footsteps. I could hear so many boots against the stone, I immediately almost broke into a run. Grabbing Spider's arm, I pulled him forward, and we sprinted towards the door when we heard the first yells. They were coming down the opposite hall, and there were so many. They had come for Fisher. We swung the door open and slammed it behind us as I hastily used my charm a third time, this time to lock the door. Angry calls and fists pounding against the oak as we ran to the cage. There was only silence. For a moment, I feared he had died while we were gone. But then came a weak whisper in the darkness. Have you brought it? Her voice, weak and gasping. We have, Spider answered, as he removed it from his belt and holding the blade in the cloth, handed it handle first through the bars. Fisher's weak and shaking hand reached up, and the fingers wrapped around the bone with strange familiarity. Immediately, the energy within the room changed. I could only compare it to when a spirit begins to manifest, an electric buzzing power. Fisher and the Flayer began to sit up slowly, and it seemed to me as if the blade was shining as he moved it sensually over his broken body like it were a wand. And I watched as the wounds began to heal. The eyes which opened in the darkness were violet, and I knew this was not Fisher. The banging on the door had changed one solid slam after another as I attempted to break it down. What will we do? Spider said, looking to me. You shall go. Shala answered, as the lock on the cage snapped and the door opened. "But what of you and Fisher?" he asked. I was already heading back towards the tunnel through which we had snuck in, trying to pull Spider with me. We cannot leave you." He was on the verge of tears. "We will be fine," the Flayer answered as they stepped from the cage together in Fisher's healing body and stood popping his neck and loosening his shoulders as if just getting out of bed in the morning. Then she took a moment and gazed down at her instrument with adoration. "You have been a good ally, boy," she answered, still staring at the blade, with the door shaking behind her. "Neither of you should be here for this. There will be much trouble, much havoc, and much blood. Go. I will care for my fishermen." "But what about the men? They are coming," Spider shouted as I dragged him to the tunnel. The Flayer smiled. An awesome and terrifying sight. "Let them come." And the door burst open as I pushed Spider into the tunnel first. One last look over my shoulder before I would go. I saw the men storming in and suddenly stopping in their steps at the sight of their opponent standing before them. A sudden cold silence, the clicking of hammers as guns were cocked, and the sound of blades unsheathed. And then screams. Sudden thuds of bodies landing. More screams. I crawled into the tunnel and fled as fast as I possibly could. I had set the Flayer free. "Do you know any other way out of here?" I asked as we crawled out into the hallway. "We won't be able to get through any of the back ways. They are all on the other side, where there," he paused and his expression became distressed. "Where they are fighting the Flayer," I finished, and ushered us back the way we had come. "Will they be okay? I mean, do you think they can actually win?" I found it truly touching the amount of concern the boy had for this strange person we had only recently met. It showed to me a genuinely caring soul apart from the horror I had first witnessed. From what I've seen, Spider, the Flayer is capable of profound destruction, and Mr. Antoine Fisher is probably quite adept at survival as well. Right now, we must focus on our own escape, which will entail us leaving through the front door. There is a way out. If I can get to the sewer line down that hall, he offered nervously. We stood back behind the curtain, which led back into the main pit area, and peeking through, I saw that pandemonium had broke out. Most of the patrons had rushed for the doors in fear of a raid from the watch, as unlikely as it may be. The paid stooges of the bosses were assembling and pushing in groups into the bowels to crush whatever threat had erupted below. We will need to become a part of that crowd, pushing out before they are all gone, I said, pulling down my hat, pushing us into the chaotic hustle. "Keep your head down," I commanded, and watched as Spider disappeared into his cloak. We read the tale of the crowd, but with some luck, we could blend enough to escape. We rushed shoulder to shoulder with frightened, panicky crowd, and thankfully, I had not seen any sign of Bambo, who I hoped had left with the other thugs. I sighed with relief as we made it out the door and into the alley, and rushed for the stairs. It was pouring down rain, and thunder boomed in the sky above. We got to the stone steps, and I could see the clouds alighting with electricity in the darkness when I heard a too familiar voice call out, "Where are you going, Trick?" Bambo stood at the top of the stairs with two other hired hands of the boss blocking our escape. "Thought we had a deal, Trick." He had his horrid smile as he gripped his axe gun. "What, you didn't think I'd notice when your gold turned to lead? A little reverse alchemy? I expected such deception from you." I quickly tried to calculate my alternate route, but return to the pit was not an option. "What are you doing with the boss's pet?" He gestured at Spider, and my stomach began to lurch with terror. I pushed him behind me. Just let him go, Bambo," I called out over the thunder and rain. "He wasn't even with me. He was leaving with the others." "I'm not leaving you too," the boy called out angrily. I grimaced. My hands tightened around my cane. I was out of options. I drew the blade. "Oh-ho!" Bambo laughed, bringing chuckles from the other menacing figures behind him. "Are you going to poke me with your sword, Tricky?" he roared with hilarity. "Do you know how to use that?" Spider said without sarcasm. "I took a year of fencing," I answered with honesty. "Unfortunately, I'm terrible," I admitted, having missed many of my classes to my other activities. Spider stared at me with a strange mixture of curiosity and disappointment. "But that is not why I brought the sword." I held it up, and I began to concentrate as I aimed the point at Bambo's mocking, twisted face. The words began to appear in my mind, just as I had repeated them over and over for weeks. "I just needed a long piece of metal," I explained, as I began to whisper the chant. I had not wanted to have to do this. It was an action of the greatest danger, a risk of which I had never planned on taking. Never had I experimented with art of that level, something so dangerous and powerful, and yet an excitement had stirred within me the same as if I stood at the dice table or a gambling wheel. I remembered when I was a child and standing with my parents during the midsummer festival. My father handed me a firework called a firefly candle. "Point it at the sky, LD," they shouted as they lit the end, and I held it over my head, giddy with expectation. I could so clearly recall the delight and sense of power and magic as the fiery balls of burning light had erupted from its point and launched in various colors high into the air. The feeling so similar to how I felt right now as the surge of warmth began to flood my body, and my heart pounded hot molten blood through my veins as the nervousness dissolved into singular and overpowering ecstasy. Bambo had started to come forward, but now froze as he questioned his safety for the first time. I was almost smiling now, as I not only saw, but felt the white, hot surge of bright electricity fall from the sky and connect to the sword in a blast of brilliant power before surging forward in the direction I aimed. The sheer heat of the pure lightning bursting forward, so close. I could feel it on my hands and face, and yet directed away from my body forward. The exhilaration was intoxicating as I realized that I had pulled a lightning bolt from the sky and thrown it like a lance at my enemies. Yes, my enemies, who were encompassed and destroyed in a way I will never forget. I had never wanted to take life, but I had wanted to command this power. Deep down, I had wanted it, and I could hear their screams in the blast of blinding blue-white electricity, and then it was over. "Come on," came a voice. I was struggling. I was gone. "You must get up. Wake up." Someone was shaking me. "We have to run." I opened my eyes and there was Spider, shaking me from my stupor. Great high spirits, the pain, the exhaustion. My body felt used and wasted. Never had I felt so absolutely sick and horrible. I was trying to stand and look down to see the shriveled hunk of blackened metal in my hand. My sword cane. I began to remember and forced myself to my feet, and the world spun around me, the alley, the rain, and the darkness, the piles of smoking human refuse which lay scattered around me. Spider was dragging me along now on legs which had no strength, and shook violently beneath me. I fought to reclaim my senses. I pointed to the turn we needed to make. There was a street. Spider was frightened and confused. I saw a form rush from the shadows. I heard a familiar voice. "Elden! This way!" It was Patrick. My mind reeled, and I longed for darkness and sleep. He was there, taking us to a coach. He had come. My friend had come. "Is this the boy? Did you find him?" he was saying. "It is. It's him," I managed to say. But as soon as he placed me in the seat of the coach, blackness stirred to return. "What happened?" I heard him say as the carriage began to roll. "Magic," I whispered. "Magic."